On stage she smiled and sang, but no one really knew what was going on behind that beautiful voice. It was with pride that Jeannie Seely, Miss Country Soul, stood under the big old Opry lights for more than 50 years, but now that she's 90, she's showing what those lights never showed. There were quiet fights and betrayals, and she had to be strong to wear a miniskirt on a stage that wasn't ready for women like her. She had been following the unwritten rules for a long time, but no longer. Jeannie is finally telling the truth, and it's not always a pretty picture. No amount of applause can take away from what she has to say about the Opry country music and her own story. Because Jeannie Seely is finally ready to be heard for the first time in her wonderful long career, what comes next will make everything different. Before the rhinestones, the lights in the big old Opry stage, in Pennsylvania there was Titusville, a quiet town in the northwest of the state that is better known for its oil rigs than its country singers. But that's where Jeannie Seely was born in 1940. She came from a poor working-class family that never had much but always had music. Her parents were not well known. It wasn't a big house, but that little girl had so many hopes she couldn't hold them all. Jeannie was singing on the neighborhood radio when she was 10 years old. Her voice was very soft but clear. She knew something most people didn't know even back then. She should have been on stage. But hopes and dreams don't pay the rent. He got her first job at a bank after high school. In the early 1960s, she moved to California in search of sun. But what's more important is looking for opportunities. In that job she typed up contracts at Liberty Records during the day and wrote songs at night. That's when things began to line up. Dottie West, a famous country singer, had one of her songs called Leavin' and Saying Goodbye. After that there were more cuts, more co-writes, and more doors that were closed but barely opened. Jeannie didn't want to stay behind the scenes though. She also wanted to sing her own songs. Then 1966 came along. Not only did her sultry song Don't Touch Me climb the charts that year, it also blew the door wide open. It got to #2 on the Billboard Country chart and won her a Grammy for Best Female Country Singing Performance. In country music history, she was only the third woman to win that award. Jeannie Seely went from being a girl who writes songs to a woman that everyone is talking about in an instant. Happiness did not come free though. Some people welcomed her backstage in Nashville. People looked at her and thought she was strange. She wasn't from a Southern royal family. She didn't act pretty or wear pearls. She had her own mind, a sparkle in her eye, and a sure step in her step. But the Opry still noticed her, and in 1967 they gave her the most prized offer in country music, a spot in the Grand Ole Opry cast. It was like a dream come true for Jeannie, but she didn't know what it would cost her because the things that made her unique would also make her bad. They were not used to seeing that kind of woman, and when she first came on stage at the Opry, it wasn't just her voice that made news, it was her skirt. The Grand Ole Opry stage had seen famous people walk on its shiny boards before Jeannie Seely joined in 1967. She did something that no woman had ever done before. She wore a short skirt. The skirt itself wasn't very fancy. In Hollywood terms, it wasn't even flashy. The air was heavy with custom on the Opry stage, where women still wore long gowns and heels. It was like someone had set off a firecracker in the front row. People in the crowd let out gasps. Some people clapped while others frowned. Also, the whispers were heard right away backstage. "That's not how a lady should dress. She won't stay here for long." However, Jeannie did not flinch. She wasn't trying to say anything. She was just being herself, sure of themselves, up to date, and not sorry. The same woman who made it out of a small town by working as a secretary and writing songs that won awards. She earned her spot with a voice that won a Grammy. She wasn't going to shrink to make other people feel better. Still, the moment left a mark on her. Years later, when asked about it, Jeannie would laugh and say it was just a skirt, but she would also say how much it cost her. The Opry never said anything bad about her in public, but things got worse behind the scenes. She wasn't the kind of talent they were used to or felt completely at ease with. By the late 1960s, the Opry was still stuck in the ways of the old guard. It was common for female artists to be told to sing pretty songs, smile nicely, and blend into the background. That wasn't true of Jeannie though. She told jokes. She said what she thought. She chose what to wear. People in the business world didn't always like the songs she sang because they weren't always happy. Little things began to bother her. The best performance slots are going to male acts. Some news releases didn't include her name. There were cold hands behind the scenes, but Jeannie didn't quit. She dug in. She would break the rules until they were broken if the business wouldn't stop her. They did it slowly. She became well known at the Opry, getting standing ovations and devoted fans. But that early scandal made an impact that will last forever. Some people would always think of her as that girl in the miniskirt. It didn't matter how many songs she sold or how many stages she lit up. While male artists were praised for being brave, Jeannie was often seen as difficult, pushy, or not ladylike. She wasn't trying to start a fight though. She was just trying to stay alive in a system that wasn't made for people like her. She also questioned the Opry's unspoken rules about how women should act, talk, and perform. Jeannie Seely didn't just question the dress code. She did something very different, and it changed not only her career, but also country music as a whole. What about the real fights? It wasn't about clothes, it was about honor. Behind the plush curtains of the Opry, Jeannie could see how much of that was set aside for other people. The Grand Ole Opry looked like a dream to people from other places. It was a live museum of music legends, Southern charm, and Nashville tradition. A lot of people went from far away just to see the famous stage. It was holy to the fans. For Jeannie Seely though, it was something else. Behind the famous barn doors and glowing circle of wood from the Ryman stage was a backstage that was quiet, had a clear order, and was tense without being said. From the seats, the Opry may have looked like a family, but from the changing rooms, it often felt like a war. For a long time Jeannie saw the split. There were artists who were always in the spotlight, who got primetime spots, media attention, and the red carpet treatment. After that came the rest. Those who kept the show going without getting much attention in the news or history books. What about women? Most of the time they were in the second group. Some people could sing one song each night. Some were supposed to spice things up, not be the main attraction. In front of Jeannie she saw great female artists get passed over for younger, more photogenic newcomers, or pushed to the side to make room for male headliners. She never said anything about it in public. Not back then. She did not have the money to. If you talked too loud you might lose invitations, radio plays and shows. Jeannie was already balancing on a tightrope, as a woman with views in a game that was mostly played by men. She kept coming and smiling, but she was also watching and thinking. She saw how the Opry honored its male veterans, treated them like celebrities, looked out for their legacies, and booked them often. But women didn't always get the same respect. They would often just vanish without a trace. They had names that Jeannie knew. They had stories, and she vowed in her heart to never become one of them. Still, the same thing happened over and over again as the years went by. It was a big deal to bring in younger artists, but older performers, especially women, were slowly pushed out of the stage. It wasn't mean, it was done in silence. The name for it was the slow drop. You didn't lose your job, you just stopped getting calls. Even though she was one of the legends, she sometimes felt like she was going away too. Country music changed in the 1980s and 1990s. There was more shine in business, and the Opry started to change with it. Jeannie changed, singing new songs and changing how she looked. She wasn't a part of the new Nashville machine though. She never played the business games. She was left out of them because of this. She didn't give up though. Years after years, Jeannie kept putting on shows. A lot of time had passed since her friends had retired or died, and the press had moved on. The politics she didn't like made her smile as she walked through the backstage rooms. The stage still meant something to her, even if it didn't always love her back. And after many years, when her face was wrinkled and her back was still strong, Jeannie would finally start to talk freely about what she saw behind those curtains, not with anger, but with honesty, because she had earned the right to tell her story after living through the Opry's silence for so long. Love has always been a big part of country music, but for Jeannie Seely, it wasn't just on stage. It was real and raw, and it was often there for her when the curtains went down. People outside of Jeannie's family knew that she married the famous singer Hank Cochran in 1969. They were a country music power couple. Between them they had Grammys, hits, and a lot of history, but things were rough behind the scenes. Hank was smart, but he was having problems. There was a lot of love and stress in the marriage. Long nights, high hopes, and two artists who are fighting to stay true to themselves while being squished together in each other's shadows. There wasn't much talk about it from Jeannie. She didn't talk about her problems in public very often, but after many years, she finally accepted it. Love can still hurt, even when it's real, and the pain doesn't always go away when the relationship does. At some point they broke up, and Jeannie was left to pick up the pieces, both personally and professionally. There was no breakup in her life after the divorce. Anything to keep herself from falling was done in the name of music, touring, recording, writing, playing. The praise was great, but when it ended, the loneliness set in. The business world changed quickly. For a moment, you're the next big thing. The next thing you know, your name is well known, but radio stations and big labels aren't calling you. Especially for women, the fall from importance could be quick and cold. It was clear to Jeannie. She saw how her peers, like Dottie West, Patsy Cline and Loretta Lynn, were all dealing with personal problems, and the gap between themselves and the rest of the music